Good morning. I am Tanya Saunders, Principal of Washington Premier Group and founder of Mid-Tier Advocacy, a 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. I would first like to thank the Asian American Chamber of Commerce and especially Rina Bhatia, CEO of Proposal Helper, for featuring me on this webinar. As a consultant and lobbyist, I've had the honor and privilege to represent many Fortune 500 clients on public policy such as Eastman Kodak, federally employed women, just to name a few, on legislative matters for more than 2 decades. The purpose of this webinar is to share a snapshot of a few policy changes that impact small business. This is being shared as informational only and not intended to act as a guide on how to grow your business. I must add that we are in an unprecedented time and the landscape is fluid, so the information provided is subject to change. I'm happy to take questions at the end of the presentation, and any questions that might require more time will be addressed after the webinar via email. You can contact me at tsaunders@washingtonpremiergroup.net for more information. So let's get started. Will opportunities begin to shrink in the federal market for small business? Well, unfortunately, just like in an election, it's too early to call. Where do you grow from here? How you grow your business largely depends on you. Policy, rules, and regulations in federal government contracting simply determine the rules of engagement. And sometimes the rules make it more complicated for a small business to participate in the federal marketplace. Advocacy, however, can help level the landscape for small and mid-tier concerns. Here are a few business tips that most small businesses engage in to increase opportunities. Invest in your business. Software, hardware, facilities, equipment, and most importantly, people are all necessary investments. These investments will help you to scale up. Focus on improving standards. All businesses will soon be required to have cyber and data security. Please note, if you are a defense contractor, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, otherwise known as CMMC, program establishes one unified standard to secure the DoD supply chain. The CMMC framework will require any company in the DoD supply chain to become certified before it can do business. Best-in-class vehicles. Best-in-class is said to increase the need for teaming across the small business community. Small businesses that are adequately prepared for these requirements could see potential expansion in the coming year. The use of these vehicles are expected to grow. Network, network, network. Become a part of an organization where you are able to get to know other business owners. Always be on the lookout for teaming partners, mentors, or proteges to increase your capacity and your capability. The way that the federal government is purchasing goods and services is changing. And finally, mergers and acquisitions, M&A in 2020. Well, there's been a lot of consolidation within the government contracting community, and some believe that this trend will continue. Unfortunately for government contractors, there's always an added layer of complexity from requirements, especially if you're a small business, rules and regulations that, if you miss them, could disqualify you from bidding. Incorporating some or all of these tips are great. However, what most business owners don't include in their growth strategy because they're either too busy or not informed on how to handle Congress. And that is the role that Congress plays in determining how the rules apply to federal contracting and specifically to your business. Those things should not be overlooked. Let's examine how Congress impacts small business and why lobbying Congress is a powerful tool that, as a business concerned about growth, can use to defend against certain policies, as well as encourage or show support for policies that support the continued growth of a small business. As some of us are aware, Congress has broad authority to impose requirements upon the federal procurement process. That is, the process whereby agencies obtain goods and services from the private sector, as well as how many businesses engage or how business actually engage with each other. Prompt pay is a great example. And most recently, Congress enacted a couple of legislative fixes intended to support the advanced small business, largely due to advocate support, which means if you are on the cusp of growing beyond your size standards, you might now qualify as a small business. SBA rule changes and what to expect. The Small Business Runway Extension Act of 2018, which was largely supported by MTA and other small business representatives, passed Congress as part of the NDAA 2018. It's now a final rule. Here's what it does. The Small Business Runway Extension Act gives you 5 years instead of 3. In fact, under the Small Business Runway Extension Act, small businesses can calculate their revenue based on the average of the last 5 years instead of the last 3 years. The congressional intent behind this legislation, which now is a final rule, is Small Business Runway Extension Act of 2018 is to help advanced small contractors successfully navigate the middle market as they reach the upper limits of their small size standard. This gives most small businesses a way to qualify as a small business for a longer period of time and also qualify for set-asides for a longer period of time. The SBA issued the final rule announcing that the Act's new formula for determining the size status of some companies would become effective as of January of this year. The SBA has also added a 2-year transition period ending on January 6, 2022 for implementing the new measurement. This period allows companies the option of choosing whether to calculate their size based on the last 3 years or the last 5 years of revenue. The rule will not be applied retroactively, but rather will impact size status certifications provided in connection with future solicitations and contract awards. HubZone has issued its final rule. What it does allows an individual to continue to be treated as a hub zone and allows a firm to certify on an annual basis. Here are 2 significant changes. An individual will continue to be treated as a hub zone resident if that individual worked for the firm and resided in a hub zone at the time the concern was certified or recertified as a hub zone, even if the area where the individual lives no longer qualifies as a hub zone, or the individual has moved to a non-hub zone area. Hub zone firms will only be required to certify on an annual basis, meaning such concerns will no longer be required to qualify as a hub zone at the time of each offer for a hub zone contract and award. In addition, the final rule will also indicate that when a company buys an office located in a hub zone or enters into a long-term lease for office space, the space to be its principal office, that business will be able to meet the principal office hub zone criteria for a period of at least 10 years, even if at some point after the property is purchased or leased, the office location no longer qualifies as a hub zone. The idea behind this rule is that the hub zone program should incentivize and reward companies that invest in hub zones. So no matter if your company is large, mid-size, or small, you need to understand the changes to the small business rules. Even if you're a large business, small business rules affect your supply chain, your teaming arrangements, capture strategy, and competitive proposal analysis. SBA promulgates rules based on legislative action or the need to clarify intent of the agency's position on policies that fall under SBA authorization. The public is always invited to enter comments before a proposed rule becomes final. These notifications are published in the Federal Register. So what else is on the horizon? Well, SBA is proposing to merge the A2A Business Development BD Mentor Protege Program and the All Small Mentor Protege Program to eliminate confusion and unnecessary duplication. Federal contractors should monitor the public comments on SBA's proposed rule and consider how the final rule may impact their business and strategy for federal procurement. There's also the recertification, which is now a final rule. All small business concerns should be aware of this rule change and consult with counsel regarding their re-representation and recertification duties. Please note, this rule takes effect at the end of this month on March 30th, 2020. Also worth noting, the WOSB certification for all women-owned businesses. In summer of this year, the certification process for women-owned small business and economically disadvantaged women-owned small business will change as put forth by Congress in the 2015 NDAA. You will no longer be able to self-certify as a WOSB or an EDWOSB. Please go to SBA's website for more details. The next slide simply is a reminder that there are SBA field offices whose main purpose is to provide access to local resources and services through partnerships that can be of valuable support to your business growth. In addition, outside resources are available, whether you need access to capital or HR support from vendors, consultants, all who provide professional staff, accounting, online tools, and so much more. The next slide also reminds us the prime and sub relationship continues to be an area of concern. Congress and SBA are trying to enact policies to address similar issues surrounding prime contractors that are not providing small businesses with adequate subcontracting opportunities, as well as payment when prompted, and those type of issues which remain a problem for small business. Access to capital, if you're an employee-owned company or a cooperative, is still an issue for Congress. Currently, SBA's 7A loan program requires a personal guarantee from any individual or entity who owns a 20% share or greater of the business. This guarantee enables the lender to seize the personal assets of the guarantor to repay the loan if business assets are insufficient to cover loan payments. Given their unique ownership structure, providing this guarantee is very important for business owners, and making access to 7A loans by cooperative businesses nearly impossible. Even though Congress enacted the Main Street Act of 2018 as part of the NDAA 2019 Defense Authorization, employee-owned or ESOPs and cooperatives still face challenges accessing the 7A program. On the next slide, we see contract consolidation and bundling. Both acquisition strategies make it difficult for small firms to compete. Action of consolidating 2 or more individual procurement into a single procurement, it makes it hard for single and small businesses to compete. Consolidation may resemble bundling, but it's just slightly different. Consolidation is an act of consolidating 2 or more individual procurements into a single procurement. What happens? It freezes small business out, it reduces the number of awards, and it requires the awardee to have greater qualifications than most small businesses may otherwise have. And on the next slide, with contract bundling, this is a trend that has been popular, as we all know, with the Department of Defense, as well as now other agencies. It is a scheme that's designed to reduce the number of contractors who are eligible to compete for government business. These programs that have been veiled as procurement reform or cost-saving reform methods are really a process to bundle smaller contracts into one large contract, which eliminates all but the largest of businesses from the competition. It's an age-old practice, and it places small business at such a disadvantage that most are not eligible to compete for government procurement. Congress can and should do more to ensure the program and its participants can meet growing demand. The SBA Authorization and Improvement Act is still pending before Congress. This bill was authored by Chairman Senator Marco Rubio and aims to modernize and streamline some of these SBA programs. It would be the first comprehensive reauthorization of the Small Business Act in nearly 20 years. Although the legislation is now stalled, it is likely that many of the initiatives in the bill will somehow find their way into future policy initiatives. This remains a bill to watch. The next slide, lobbyist chambers and associations are very helpful in elevating small or mid-sized business issues before these relevant congressional members and their committees in an organized effort. The next slide, together, they provide a collective way of sharing concerns with policymakers in addition to displaying broad-based support as represented by a chamber, trade association, or organization, either for or against the position, which is better known as a grassroots campaign. In addition to presenting issues effectively, it's also a way to afford effective representation in contrast to the millions of dollars that large corporations spend on lobbying on their own behalf. And in fact, the next slide shows how much large business spent in 2019 alone. They have the dollars and the ability to unduly influence the legislative process in order to enact favorable policies that support their interests. The next slide also gives us another look at who spent the money. So if you are a small business growing into mid-size, you're probably painfully aware that many small firms choose to sell or be acquired by a larger company once they're close to losing their size and set-aside status. Mid-tier Advocacy was formed to provide yet another option. We act as the collective voice for companies that are too small to be big and too big to be small, to fight for policy that will provide other options for business to grow and remain sustainable over time. So where do you grow from here? At MTA, we need your input and we welcome your support. We make it our business to understand your business. The takeaways simply are, do your due diligence regarding these new rules and regulation requirements. Whether you are small or mid-size, policy will be drafted regardless if Congress hears from you. And it is better to be proactive than reactive if you want to grow from here. Thank you.
So again, we'll be sharing the slides with all of you who registered. If you are looking to promote your company, you're interested in being a panelist on our webinar and have some educational material to share, please feel free to contact me. We would love to have you on our next webinar. Thank you all for coming.